Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today we have a very special episode for you. We have two incredible teachers. They've both been on the show today. Our first guest, Howard Falco, is a mindfulness and mental strength coach and the author of I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. Using the power of self-awareness, he works on mental strength with athletes in college and all professional sports. Our second guest, Dr. Eddie O'Connor, is a clinical sports psychologist, fellow and certified mental performance consultant through the Association of Applied Sports Psychology and member of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee Sports Psychology Registry. He is also the author and the host of The Psychology of Performance, How to Be Your Best in Life through the Great Courses. Today, we are going to discuss the mindset of success, excellence, flow state, and so much more. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us.
Great to be back.
Yeah, well, this is a little bit of a test. I had the idea recently that I wanted to have multiple guests on, so I appreciate you guys being the guinea pigs, and I appreciate you both as individuals, and you both do incredible work. So I thought it would be amazing because there's so much information out there around what a success mindset is, what an excellent mindset is, what is flow state, and you guys are the best to kind of decode those things. So let's begin, I guess, with you guys just sharing a little bit about yourself, and then we will start covering all these topics.
Okay.
First.
Okay, sure. So I'm a mental strength peak performance coach with college and professional athletes. I work in every sport, and I work on the power of self-awareness and how to understand how your identity is a key component to what you create in your life and what results you ultimately achieve. The work comes out of two books I've had published. I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are, as you mentioned, and Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life. And I also mirror the work in sports with individuals for the same idea, how to understand, how to look at yourself from a different perspective, shift your awareness and the way that you look at who you are, which ultimately leads to a change in what you experience on the surface with what you're trying to create. So it aligns more of your thoughts and feelings with what you're looking to do. And that's the work I've been doing for the last 15, 16 years around the world.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm a clinical sports psychologist. So I've got the blend of the mental skills training from the sports psychology side, but I also wanted to specialize then in what do athletes struggle with the most. So I guess if I had a tagline, I'd say it's overcoming the obstacles to excellence. I find that we all have big dreams and big goals and how do we get there? But in my work, I tend to find that it's more about what gets in the way. So I take a mindfulness approach and overlap, I think, a lot, Howard, with what you do in the idea of values and what's important to you, and then the willingness to do what it takes to get there. And similarly, I work from high school through college and pro, and then do a lot of public speaking to bring the message to larger audiences.
Very cool.
Awesome, gentlemen. So let's dive right in with the first question. How would you guys define either a success mindset, an excellence mindset, or let's say like a Zen mindset? Would you define those as characteristics? Would you, how would you distinguish those? And how do we develop that? So that's a terribly phrased question. I'll give it back over to you guys to try to muddle through it.
Go ahead, Dr. Eddie. Why don't you start with that?
Okay. Well, one of the things that the biggest obstacles, again, I work with a lot of perfectionists, work with a lot of athletes who are really disrupted when they make a mistake. And I love my perfectionists. And I wish more people were like that because that striving to get everything right and do everything right, and the hunger that they have is fantastic. But when I think of excellence, and then if you bring in the Zen aspect of it, that's not my expertise, but the idea of the peace that can come along with the pursuit of excellence, I really see that there's a large aspect of how do you handle that adversity? How do you understand, for example, the value of mistakes? That's a conversation I have a lot with my performers, and how they have to change that relationship from it being something that is negative and that's bad and that they use to beat themselves up about, but rather that they see every mistake as an opportunity to learn. Now that's almost cliche. We've done so much of that and you hear that all the time, but I find that actually stepping back and really being able, let me ask both of you, if you learn from every mistake you've ever made in your life, how good would you be right now in all of those areas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See the nodding. And I tend to get like a heck of a lot better than I am right now because of the way our ego gets involved, or the way that, the shame that we can feel, the embarrassment. So I think that to answer your question more directly, Matt, when I think about excellence, I really think of somebody who is humble enough to really look at where the mistakes are and continue to want to grow, and actually takes every opportunity as a learning opportunity to move in that direction consistently.
Awesome.
Excellent.
What do you think, Howard?
I agree. I think that one of the main things is seeing that, you either win or you learn, right? And that's another old phrase in sports, or in life as well. So to me, the excellence mindset or the success-based mindset comes from somebody who has a bigger and deeper trust and faith, not only in themselves and what they're going to ultimately accomplish, but also in the fact of how life works with you. And that leads more to the Zen end of things, which is trusting the flow of life and trusting that whatever you're encountering at the time has importance and meaning for you on your journey. And it's a critical component of helping you get to where you want to go. That helps take down the resistance that you might have been feeling towards that, when you can operate from that level of, dare I use the word, faith in the process. But it helps athletes, I think, embrace it more and find the learning in it, rather than spend time resisting or being in an emotional state over it. Not that there isn't going to be emotion, because there's so much intensity that goes into what these athletes at a high level are trying to do. There's naturally going to be some energy because of that. But the lingering effects of the emotion hindering the learning won't be as much when they're in more tune with the process and the fact that this has meaning for them and it's going to help them. And there's a deeper faith in themselves from the standpoint of how much they believe in themselves. And that, to me, always gets tested in the process. Where's your faith and belief in yourself? If you're getting this upset, where's that coming from? So I think excellence comes from a more macro view and a knowing that they're ultimately going to get there. And that carries them through a lot of the challenges, versus a lack of an excellence or success mindset, which is more of a fear-based mindset, which causes them to get stuck more. So that's how I see it. And then the Zen piece coming in is definitely something deeper, where you find a richer and deeper meaning in how life has really been working with you your entire life right up to this moment. And that's a little bit of a deeper path we can go on, but that's, to me, where the Zen piece comes in.
Yeah, those are both great perspectives, and you're both talking about adversity and how we overcome those challenges, because that is really what we're always facing in our life. It's a constant path of challenge, adversity, and failure, and how we really handle those things is the most important thing. When I've worked with people and talk about, let's say, performance or someone who's sabotaging, it's usually because they're not able to handle that adversity very well. And one of the concepts I really like is taking that challenge, that failure, but not defining it as failure. Just as Dr. Eddie said, see it as an opportunity to learn, but also be whole as an individual. If everything that you are is riding on your success in this sport at whatever stage it is, right? You start in the minors, you go to a higher bar and a higher bar and a higher bar. And if you fail at that, then your identity says, oh, I'm a failure. And you're not going to be able to bounce back. You're not going to be able to change anything. And I think it's so important that an individual understands that their power comes from their ability to respond to what happens. And that's what's going to take them to the next step. So maybe you can talk a little bit about adversity and how people handle failure, both in sport and also in life, because people who are entrepreneurs or want to be successful, they have just a different gauge, right? They might want to provide for their families. They might try and go do something in entrepreneurship. So can you guys share a little bit about overcoming adversity and creating a powerful frame around failure?
Sure. Well, again, I'll go to sort of the Zen end of things, which is from a Zen perspective or a Zen mindset, or flow state, I guess you would call it. Nothing is resisted. So from that general idea, the distinction is that when an athlete has an experience that they don't want, it's not that they're in acceptance that this is going to be in the next moment by accepting it. And that's the fear of accepting the moment. They don't want to accept it because they don't want to believe it's who they are. But that's the only way they're going to improve on the following moment, is if they come to acceptance that that's who they've been up to this moment. because you can't change what you haven't accepted as true. So if you stay in a state of resistance to adversity or challenge, life is very divine in the way that it keeps sending us lessons until we get it, and then it doesn't need to send us lessons anymore. And so to me, the quickest path is just to be in a place where you're prepared as much as you can be. And this is why I have so much respect for athletes, because they're constantly being vulnerable. They're constantly putting themselves out there for exposure on whether they're going to succeed or not going to succeed. And again, it goes back to that there is no such thing as failure. It's learning experiences, and something Dr. Eddie mentioned. But I think what really helps with the adversity is to not see that things in life happen to you, but really embrace the notion that life is working with you all the time. The bigger the mountain you're trying to climb, be prepared, because the tests are going to be bigger for you. The storms are going to be bigger. The challenge to get over certain cliffs are going to be bigger than they are if you're climbing a hill. And so the bigger your dream, your awareness has to expand to really be ready for that, while keeping your mind set on infinite possibility, but to the one that endures comes the ultimate victory. And so that's really what it's going to test the person on. So that's how I would look at it from an adversity standpoint.
Yeah, and I can really piggyback on that word acceptance. That is huge in where I start right from the very beginning, combined with the expectations. So you had mentioned about that, like if you want to be in the top 1%, that means you have to do what 99% of the other people either can't or won't.
Yeah.
And there's a real check that I have to do with my athletes at every level about the work that it takes to put in. And everybody knows that it's hard work, but almost every athlete I'm working with, they all think that they're working hard, and they are, but it's the bare minimum to just be part of that team. When you start talking about competition, everybody's actually working hard, and everybody's working very, very hard. And the higher up you go, the more they're actually sacrificing of their time and their effort and their energies, that it becomes a truly elite group. Like we use this word of greatness and excellence way too much. I mean, the fact is, half of us are below average. And I don't know anybody that's admitted to be in that lower half. So the more we start to really respect that, I start out with my athletes and performers of all kinds. And much like you had said, really starting to say, how do you accept the trials and tribulations and the effort that has to go in with that? Because it's not going to be smooth. And if you have any of those expectations, I think that's the resistance that you were talking about. Yes, of course you don't like it. You're not supposed to. The repetitive, if you're learning an instrument and you have to do, certain repetitive movements over and over again for, 1,000 hours, that's not fun. But are you willing? One of my favorite words. Are you willing to do the things that you don't like in service of accomplishing this? And that's where I think that the piece starts to come in. It's not a matter of making yourself feel better, because winning doesn't feel good, or the end result does, but the process of it doesn't. So if you're actually willing to feel all the things that it takes to get there, I think that's where the piece starts to come in. So that's the acceptance. It's the acceptance of the reality of what it takes. And I think everybody needs that check in.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just thinking as you were talking about the success feat and how narrow the funnel gets as you start getting to more elite performance and higher levels of, when you go from high school to college to professional. I mean, that funnel gets tight. And because of that, you really have to step up every aspect of being a professional to get there. And this isn't just for sports. This is for business. This is for, relationships that you want to take to the next level of connection and intimacy. I mean, it's everything. So, but what I was going to add was, I really truly believe that over the last 30 years with media, and then recently the last 5 to 7 years with social media, we are so conditioned to see the final product when the lights are on, that everything looks, or, we hear about the IPO where the guy made $2 billion, or, we see, the success in entertainment. And we're so conditioned to think, oh, I want to do that. And if people had any idea what is going on behind the scenes, when I first started this work and worked with athletes and, was in locker rooms all the time, the amount of intensity, focus, energy, and work day in and day out, it would shock most people what the work is done before those lights go on the field or the court. And that goes for business as well as an entrepreneur, or, even relationship struggles before someone has just an amazing one. So there's a lot of work behind it. And I think that people that are on this path sometimes need an awareness check on, okay, I need to really be ready to dig in and work for this and put my head down and keep working until I'm there.
And no, we can't even expect it. Like, no matter how well this podcast is projected, no matter how many times we say it, it reminds me of when I was coaching Rocket football. And so these fifth graders are out there, and my friend is coaching, and he's yelling at these kids to dig deep. And I turned to him, I'm like, they're going to pull out like beach shovels. Like, they have no idea what digging deep means, and all these things about, toughness. I'm like, they don't know what you're talking about. They have no perspective. And I think at every level of sport, and as performances you go on, no matter how we talk about it, we don't have the language, I think, it's just something that they have to experience. And that's the joy of my job and your jobs, I think, that you'd agree, that walking them through that process and reminding them and highlighting that, hey, of course you're going to get frustrated when the adversity shows up, but you're supposed to. This is part of the process. Of course you're surprised at how hard this is. Of course you could never imagine it because you've never been here before. This is your personal best. You have to hurt more than you've ever hurt before. I say that a lot with my runners. Speed, like, it's just a pain tolerant sport. It's like the faster you go, the more you're going to hurt. And if you want comfort, it's going to come at the cost of a personal record. So be ready for that and be ready to not like it and learn each and every time that you do it.
Oh, it's really, really good.
You guys shared so much stuff in just that I want to go on so many different tangents. So I'm going to share like a few ideas that I was thinking when you guys were speaking, and one of you can just pick up what you feel is most exciting. But I love how you guys are talking about the process, because we definitely live in that world of the finished product, right? Where nobody wants to do the hard work. And on top of that, people want the quick fix. And I was listening to Mark Devine on Michael Gervais podcast, and he's got a great podcast on sports performance, and both of them were like, we are so upset with the biohacking culture because they are such high performers and they're aware of how much effort it takes. People don't want to put in the effort. They want that easy road, but you can tell. And I like, Dr. Eddie, your example of the funnel getting tighter, of how much actual work and sacrifice goes into it. I remember hearing somebody say something along the lines like, if you want to be an Olympic gold medalist, you need to commit suicide, and it's social suicide, family suicide, everything else is going to be dropped for you to just focus on this one thing, because someone else is going to be doing that. And you need to be able to compete at this level. You need to be able to endure the process at this level. And so my question to you guys is, how important do you think talent versus process is? Do you think talent is more important than process? And how does one develop that mental toughness and that grit?
Well, Howard, I'll let you take it. It was your funnel.
So I see it as a three-legged stool. There's hard work, grit, and hard work, which is actually what develops the talent. Then there's talent that you can be born with some of it and then develop some of it. So that's the second leg of the stool. And then the third leg for greatness is the belief. And you can have grit, hard work, and belief, and it'll work. You can have talent and belief, and it'll work. But it won't work with just grit and talent without the belief. So I think the belief is the key component in that. So it's great to have that effort, but the will to work that hard, that is fueled by the belief, because that's what'll push you through anything. That's when you won't stop, because that belief carries you through. When there's doubt, then there's hesitation, and doubt can be a poison. But that's okay. It's part of the process of moments of having doubt and then having success and not having success and learning from it and getting fired up again. And that's why when the sun comes up every day, it's a new morning. I tell a lot of my golfers, hey, it's a new round. The old round doesn't exist anymore. You got a blank scorecard, so you get to go and create it any way you want today.
It's got to be a new shot each time.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Exactly. So I like grit, and I think grit's an important component, but I think it's got to be fueled by will, and then ultimately leads to develop talent, and then the vulnerability to go out there in the moments that really matter and make yourself vulnerable enough to either succeed, or if you don't succeed, to learn why you didn't, and then to dig in there.
Yeah, I'm curious too, like what you guys would think, because I feel like, I use the example, let's say LeBron James is gonna make the game-winning shot, or whoever the case is, right? And if he's at the line and he believes he's gonna make the shot, but also his life is in order all around that, like his family life, his process, everything else is good, and he has less stress and less identity with making the shot. He is just making that choice to make the shot through his own free will, but is okay with missing it. And if you can be okay with failure while directing every bit of your will into what you're doing, I feel like that is that fine line of like surrender, but also focused intention. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I like that, because I'm not going to disagree with what we're saying. I think, but maybe shift it from a sideways perspective and reducing it. So Anders Erikson talks about the expert on expertise, and he actually says there is no such thing as talent. And what he explains that by is that, even perfect pitch, for example, which you thought you were born with, can actually be trained if you do it in the right way through deliberate practice and you do it early enough. So I'm kind of on board with that. Now, of course, if I'm 7 feet tall, it's going to be easier to play basketball than if I'm 5 feet tall. So there are, of course, biological things, and some people have things learn them more easily than others. There are physiological differences. And if I train for the NFL right now, I would not make it. So there's a limitation to when and where. But putting some of that stuff aside, I think that the tremendous respect for the deliberate practice and the training is really where it comes down to. And much of what I work with too is that the negative thinking, the lack of confidence, and how frequently that shows up and how normal it is. I try, of course, to help my athletes be positive and be confident, because things are easier that way. But I also train them to not trust when they're not, and to learn how to actually still execute, as you were saying, Matt, to still just dial into the focus on executing the shot, no matter what your life is like, or no matter whether you can believe it or not, because maybe you're just trusting the mechanics of what needs to be done. And I find that simplification helps to move them away from some of the psychological warfare that can go on in the battle that pulls them out of the game or out of the moment or out of that flow state. So I'm not in disagreement. I think it's a lot easier, and it's great when we can have them do that. But I do like to say that, well, when you can't, you still need to be able to perform. And sometimes that's without the confidence.
Right.
Yeah, I think, yeah, go ahead, Howard.
No, I was just going to add, I think that really is one of the separating factors, at least my experience with my athletes. What makes the difference is those, when there's nights or days where they don't have it, can still gut it out and manage it enough to make it good enough for that day until they get back in the flow. Or let's say, let's take an example in football. If Tom Brady has 2 bad drives under his belt, he can manage that well enough and keep his mindset focused and positive enough so that he gets in there the 3rd time, that belief's going to shine through, and he's going to end up executing it. So he manages it during the times when for some reason it's not there. Or if a player misses at the free throw line, it doesn't affect him again, because he's living out of that bigger belief in the macro perspective that when he gets to the line again, he's got no fear, no doubt about it, and he's in a new moment. And then the other comment, I agree with you on the talent part, that it's really all can be developed, but I guess it comes down to the definition of what is talent then, right?
Right.
Some people are naturally born with faster twitch muscles and a certain awareness, hand-eye coordination, but it still has to be worked on and developed. And that grit needs to be there. And of course, the belief piece. Without that, it doesn't matter. I've seen some of the greatest athletes with the greatest amount of talent, and the belief just gets in their way, and it becomes a self-destructive process.
Yeah, I think you guys both shared really powerful insights in that. And I kind of had a Trojan horse and an agenda in that one, because I'm reading now Carol Dweck's book.
Mindset.
Yeah. And basically the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And it seems to me that, I think Dr. Eddie made some great distinctions where, you might have some setbacks, right? There might be actual setbacks. If I want to go for the NFL right now and I apply everything I can, maybe there's an opportunity, and it's possible. If I dedicated all of my life and my being to it with 100% belief, it would give me the best shot at it, right? That's what I would need to do that. And in extreme sports where, my background is more based, I'm talking to athletes who want to sometimes do something that's never been done. And so how do they develop that confidence to go try that trick that has never even been done by anyone else to go perform that? So how do they develop the strongest mindset possible to give them the best opportunity while also realizing that failure is a part of the game? But I think the important distinction that I wanted to share is that even if some people say I have no talent, some people say I have no this, I have no that, then it becomes an excuse. But what I've learned and what I've seen is that if we have, I think it would be two of Howard's pillars, just real tenacity and grit and the ability to overcome those obstacles towards our goal, the chances of us succeeding, especially in business, and if it's not directly correlated to your physical ability or what you might be gifted with, your chances of success are huge. And it seems like so many of those great people like Michelangelo or things like that, I remember seeing this quote recently, and this is where my mind is going, where their greatest work was in 60, 70, 80. And so we get to kind of choose the direction of our life and our greatness by continuing the process, overcoming adversity, even if we started with no talent whatsoever. You guys want to say something about that?
There was a question in that. That was a great statement. I think that leads to this idea of endurance, and endurance is backed up by will, and will is backed up by belief. So at the end of the day, what's driving the ultimate outcome? What caused the paintings in the Sistine Chapel? Belief, because that created will, and will created endurance over decades to accomplish it. Or David, same thing. You know, how many hours and days and weeks and months did it take before that was finished? But that started all in mind with the belief that it was possible. So to me, it's an unavoidable cornerstone of getting to the next level. And obviously the next question is, and the real key is, how do you keep raising that belief in yourself despite having so much adversity? How do you keep going no matter what? And
that's what I wanted to ask you guys. If you had tips for developing confidence in general, I feel like in working with people, and I saw Dr. Bruce Lipton talk about this, and he just talked about people's internal dialogue, and it was like 90% of his audience polled would always have just a negative frame going inside their mind. And that's not ideal. You would ideally be your cheerleader. And so how do you help your athletes develop confidence? Because there's always those levels. Even if you're confident at stage one, when you go up in competition or you go up in challenge, whatever it may be, it's going to be a harder task. And so we still need to have that confidence, even though we might be threading that needle of what our capabilities are.
I often don't make confidence the biggest target. And the reason for that is that I've seen a lot of confident athletes fail. And then there's that factor of overconfidence. So when an athlete they often come in saying, hey, I got to think positively and feel confident to play better. So what I like to teach them is that there's an independence of those three things. I have an exercise where I have them walk while they say that they can't walk and they feel weird. And it illustrates that, these are separate entities. And it's really great when I think I can do something and I feel confident. And it's so much easier than to move in that direction. So, and it might be the clients that I end up seeing, but I really am working through a lot of people who are struggling. And I think it's almost more important to detach from the lack of confidence than to necessarily have it. Because again, I want to be getting them back to, maybe we'll call it self-efficacy, as we talk about operationalizing the terms. They do have to have that sort of confidence or that belief that they can execute the move or the skill or the task at hand at that point. Because if you don't have that self-efficacy, that belief that you can actually do it, well, then you're right. Like if I don't believe that I can do a somersault off a diving board, I'm not going to do that. And that would be a good thing for me to not believe. It'd be good for me not to believe that. So I'm usually trying to get my athletes to detach and see that it's their mind's job to actually worry. This anxiety that often comes in during adversity is one of four basic human emotions. We've got happiness, sadness, anxiety, and anger. And if we're trying to live in 25% of what it means to be human, we're screwed. If we can only perform in 25% of the feelings that we could possibly have, we're going to have problems. So how do we perform with these other three? And sometimes it's a matter of recognizing that when I'm not confident or I'm fearful, it's coming out of a place that I care. Like if I think that I suck it's often not, my athletes who think they're terrible, they're actually among the best. It's not the worst athletes on the team that are struggling because they think they suck, even if they do, because they don't care as much. So this relationship with the anxieties, we started the podcast out talking about the choice of how do I interact with this fear. That's really where I end up emphasizing, is it's much more about not believing the lack of confidence and getting back to what you need to do. Whether you think you're great or not, sometimes is irrelevant to the task. If I think I'm a great sports psychologist, great. Maybe it makes me feel better, but does that help me do better with you as you sit in front of me? Or do I need to tune into what you're saying and then let somebody else judge whether that's good or not? Yeah. So I tend to try to de-emphasize that and really get back to the action focus.
This is interesting because we're coming from two completely different methodologies, maybe getting to the same result, but that is, and I hope this is okay, it's just completely counter to my approach, which is really fascinating to me to listen to and to hear that, how you're taking on and having them embrace that as okay as part of the process. Is fear a good thing? And maybe it's a distinction between confidence and belief that needs to be made. For me, confidence is a point at which your confidence in the development of your skills and what you're doing in the task at hand, and you've got a good feeling going through you about it, and it's causing you to be in a more calm state about it, and and the calmer you are, the more, I believe, your awareness expands, the closer you are to balance. That's why they say in baseball, never too high, never too low, because at emotional states, you lose perspective, your awareness starts to shut down. So if you're too negative, your awareness shuts and focuses only on the most negative. If you're too positive, that, like you mentioned, you can be in an overconfident state where you're not entertaining the possibilities you need to make. I've worked with pitchers before that, they felt like there were certain guys they could get. And I said, that's a dangerous and slippery slope. Be careful about that. You always want to respect them just enough for being in the game that you pitch to them properly so that they don't expose that kind of ego or that lack of awareness and respect for who they are. That's when you tip the scales in their favor. But so I approach it from the standpoint, not that you're avoiding the emotions you feel, but you're digging into why you have the fear and where it's coming from. And if there's fear and anxiety, it's coming from a belief of can't or won't somewhere. And what I've discovered in my work is that our deepest, truest thoughts are what life is always working to help us materialize, positive or negative. And it may be separate from what we want, but that truth has to be made manifest. And then we get to decide whether or not we like it or not, and then dig in. So the self-awareness piece is, where is the lack of belief in what you're capable of? And is that belief true? And that starts to go through the layers. And this gets back to, Matt, what you're really asking is, how do you build that belief? And again, this is why I don't want to, we could lose ourselves in semantics here. So I don't want to lose it in being overconfident or cocky or saying, oh, I'm the best, but not having the work behind it. It's about having all the work behind it. It's about developing the talent and doing all the technical work, but it's also having the belief that you're capable of it, so that you're in the most calm state when the moment arises to let that true talent come through. Because if there's a counter belief, it's going to work against you. In my experience, it could work against you at some point in helping that ultimate success come through. Because again, life's got to match you with what you truly believe is true. So as soon as one belief has 51% more energy than the other belief, then life switches on you.
And actually, I'm in complete agreement with you. Like you said, we phrase it differently and come at it, but we end up in the same place. And I'm sure we end up in the same place because I believe that as humans, there's only one way to do it right. So, I think that, you said two really good points. When you talk about how the negative thoughts get there, I think that's the difference with the positive and the negative thinking, or the belief and not belief, is that when you believe, it's there, it's quiet, and it's not in the front, as you put it. Like the task ends up being in front. But when you don't believe and you have those negative thoughts and you're fused with them, then that's in the forefront. And that's between you and your performance. So I like the way that you would phrase it in that way, because I think that's the function and then the interaction with it. I'll stop there on that point, because I think that was a really beautiful way that you had put it. And maybe, I guess, the second point that I was going to say is, it's almost like maybe another word is the trust. It sounds like you're describing trust, whether that be trust in yourself. And I like that concept
yeah.
very much.
It's trust in the ultimate outcome. And that, I think, when the athletes that I've experienced at the highest level, yeah, they get upset when they don't execute at bat and they get pissed. But what I often tell people is that the higher level athlete gets more curious than he does angry when he doesn't execute, because he wants the information out of that moment. The one who's more in doubt about their ability, or more in fear if they're going to stay up, in MLB, or if they're going to execute or eventually succeed, they stay more angry because that fear is perpetuating the anger. So how do we get, and again, each athlete is different. So, and I believe it's a very a la carte world now. It's not, you can't teach to the masses as much as we used to. It's more individual based on where everybody is. But how do you get that individual to believe in themselves more? Because my feeling is that we're all capable of truly anything we put our mind to once we understand the process and what we're up against. So where is the belief that's preventing you? And can you have the self-reflection long enough to dig in, to find it, to at least question whether it still serves you or not? And, to your point earlier, Dr. Eddie, you said that a lot of people use, a lot of that anxiety has pushed them to a certain level. And a lot of my players, are used to using fear to drive them to this point. And I say, great, if that's working for you, keep doing it. But the reason we're working together is because it hasn't anymore. It's gotten you to here, but maybe what's going to get you the next level is now to drop some of that and go more into faith. So,
and let me clarify. Actually, it's not the fear that's driving them; it's the fear that drives them into my office. I mean that quite seriously, because I'm in complete agreement with you. That formula is not going to work longhand now or long term. Now, sometimes it can be. It's like, gosh, if I'm so afraid of losing, or I hate losing so much. I've heard, I've seen that the world's best will be like, I hate it so much, I'm going to do everything I can to be sure that it doesn't happen again. But again, it's a transformation where they're not doing it in fear. They're doing it in a very positive way. But can you back up? Because I love that sentence. I want you to say it again. I think it's gold. That the highest level, when they fail or they make mistakes, they become curious. Can you say that again?
At the highest level, when they don't execute, the higher level player, the more successful, or the one really achieving excellence and success, will get more curious than they get angry. Whereas the reversal is true for someone who's not at that level yet.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
I'm going to steal it.
No, please.
Please. That's what this is for, man.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's a treat for me to just watch you guys talk, because you're again, I've interviewed you both separately and you're so wise. And what I'm thinking of is like the million paths to the way home. When someone has a firm understanding of an idea or a process that's very helpful, you can kind of get to that same result. And when we're talking about these ideas around mindset and psychology and excellence, you can only have more information and then test it and see if it works, see if it makes sense, see if it's true. And you'll have a body of work that we'll be like, you know what, this should work or this shouldn't work. But then when we test it on different people, on ourselves, we're going to have a higher level of understanding whether that works or not. And we're going to all learn. And I was thinking about when we're developing confidence, the I think it's called the ladder. What the heck? It's like you go from unconscious incompetence, then conscious incompetence. So I didn't know that snowboarding existed, so I didn't know I couldn't do a backflip. Then conscious incompetence, I know snowboarding exists, and I now am aware that I cannot do a backflip, right? Then there becomes conscious competence, where I try my first one, I probably fail a few times, I research it, I get on a trampoline, I train, and I get one. But I have to focus really, really hard until we get to that final stage of conscious or unconscious competence. And I can just do it without thinking about it, because there's so much repetition, practice, and mastery of that skill. And what we're talking about here is mastery, but the process to mastery takes so long to get to. And when you guys are talking, my mindset's a little bit different, because mine is in extreme sports and mine's in martial arts. And so I always think about this in equate of how I would have to do that in a fight, or how I would have to do it when I'm leveling up and doing a trick, or really trying something out of my realm of possibility. It's like, I know a double backflip's possible, but if I frig it up, there's going to be some serious consequence. And in a fight standpoint, it's interesting, because I've talked to some MMA fighters that told me that when they entered the cage, they were not confident. They were able to kind of power through. And then that reminded me of the idea of like a champion's mind or a winner's mind or a success mindset. They'll find a way through, or you find a way out. And that's what fighters will always say. They'll know the second you are trying to find a way out, where that champion, like the Diaz brothers or people like that, they're never trying to find a way out. They are trying to find a way to beat you. And that mental resolve and that belief in their skill and that, unconscious competence is so amazing, because the consequences are so high, and so it's really something that you embody in your being. And I feel like when we're talking at the highest levels of mastery and mindset, it's in every cell of your being, for how you walk, how you talk, how you practice. And also all of those failures are what encompass that identity, and not in like this is who I am. It's just like, this is what I'm capable of. And I think if you can do that with like the full surrender of knowing that there's always more. And that's why I like snowboarding and skateboarding, martial arts, baseball. There's never a final level mastery. It's not like, oh, well, this guy got to the final level of mastery and he could stop learning. It's this continuous learning. It's this continuous growth. So I'm not going to ask a question. I'll let you guys comment on that statement if you want. And if you want a question, I'll go into flow state, but I'll give it back to you boys.
Yeah, I think it was to the aspect which you were talking about, confidence and how to develop it. I didn't answer it a half hour ago, but it's that aspect of preparation. So I love that you brought up the concept of mastery, because that's really where, if you're going to have confidence, you have to know that you've done everything possible in the preparation to get you to that point. And that's often too where then athletes, even if they lose, they can lose with their head held high, knowing that they just, they gave their best. And I think that surprised a lot of my athletes. Like, I mean, I wish I could say everybody I've worked with is won, but that's not the case. And the difference is that even when they win, but they haven't been fully prepared, they kind of feel lucky, or there's still some anxiety. But when they lose and they've done everything that they can, like you had said, Howard, they kind of come back and they're like, okay, I could just be hungrier. I'll get you next time. Or as you had said, Matt, there's that drive of I can be better. I just have to prepare more. It's that learning that we talked about very much at the beginning about, I had no idea it would take this much. I think I love CrossFit. And so I think about Matt Fraser, and he talked about the best thing that happened to him was taking second, because he realized that as much as he was working, he had to work even harder. And then he's gone on to dominate the games the last few years, because he had to go what he thought was all in, but even more all in. There was always that another level, and it's preparation.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the comment, Matt, about the just the level, the Diaz brothers, the level of their being, it's who they are, right? And obviously the title of the book being I Am, and how that is defined drives every single aspect of your life, how you interpret yourself, how you handle adversity, how you respond to it, how you look at going forward. And as long as there's movement towards creating that identity and you're moving towards it, you can go through an experience, like you say, where you walk off the field or the court or out of the ring and you gave your best, and you can still feel on some level, not that you're happy if you didn't execute or win, but you can still feel good about the fact that you advanced towards what you're trying to become. And I think as long as an athlete knows they're moving forward, they're going to stay engaged in the process, because it's a journey. And it is the journey that's enjoyable. As long as they know they're in that process, then before they know it, by staying in the process, they'll be at the destination. It's like when you go on a hike and you're talking to someone and you're walking, all of a sudden you stop and turn around and you look and you're like, wow, did we really come this far already? Can't believe it. We've been talking for so long, didn't even realize it. That's what staying in the process is about. And I just was thinking about an athlete I had that just stepped up to the next level in something and did really, really well, but the team didn't win. But he can't control all that with the team, but you only control what he did. And he did really well. And you could see the joy, even though he wasn't happy they didn't win, which I understood. There was still a joy in the advancement of what he was trying to do to further himself, to validate what he believes he's going to become. And I think that can help with adversity. It can link to adversity too. If you can link that when you're going through that to, hey, this is part of the process that's going to get you to where you want to go. And again, I like to take this past sports, but whether it's a business challenge or whether it's a relationship challenge, it's the same thing. There's something in this. And that's how, for lack of a better word, that's how divine I believe life to be. It's really trying to help us in our creativity to manifest whatever we're trying to create for ourselves, or show us that we're delusional in certain aspects, that we need to adjust our awareness and course correct to get there or to get to a different format of it.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. And actually, I do have a question before we get to flow for both of you, because it's, again, one of the points that you had started off, and maybe you can speak to this from your book about the idea of I am. We talked about identity. And so certainly I see a lot of clients where their identity is wrapped up in the outcome, in the wins and the losses, in the scholarships, et cetera. And when they invest so much of their time and energy, I mean, I think we all somewhat have our identity wrapped up in who I am as a father or sports psychologist or what have you. But if our identity is what we do, we inevitably run into problems, particularly as athletes, because you lose or you age out or you retire. So I'm curious how you guys work with your athletes to get their identity out of their outcomes, and where do you move them into to be in that centered best place?
Do you want me to take that, Matt?
Yeah, go for it, Howard. Sure. I'll go after. Okay.
Yeah. From my standpoint, the way I work with my athletes is if they're focused on outcome, they're not focused on the process. And to me, the process is what gets them to the outcome. So I had one athlete in the golf world that was very frustrated, wasn't getting the outcome he wants, and that was self-fulfilling bad rounds because there was so much pressure to do well. It was just continuing to get worse and worse. And what I offered was to completely let go of the uncontrollable, which was what was going to happen, who was going to ask him to go to next level, recruiting, whatever it was that was going to happen. You can't control that. Stay in the controllables. And how does that serve you anyways to worry about that and to be concerned about that outcome or be concerned about the last outcome that wasn't good? It doesn't help what you're trying to execute now. Right now, take control of the controllable. The controllable is you know what you're doing here over the ball. You know exactly the kind of shot you want to hit. You've done it a million times before. Focus on that, and then focus on the next shot, wherever your ball ends up, or whatever situation you encounter, to get the ball in the hole in as few strokes as possible, to end up looking at a card where it's got a nice number on it. But don't go past the moment. Now, there's a component in this that is unavoidable, and that's faith. If you lack faith, fear is going to creep in and poison the whole outcome. At some point, you have to give it up to faith. Something you don't know about, you can't see the outcome, you don't know what's going to happen, and there's a trust or a faith just in the process that if I just focus on what I have trained and what I know how to do, and I stay in that moment, and I don't let my mind get ahead of me, then the rest will take care of itself. And there's no guarantee on that.
So it's not about having an identity, it's more of just being sure that your identity is not wrapped up in the outcome.
Correct. The identity is, for the moment they're executing what they're trying to do, the identity is how awesomely can I execute what I'm doing right now? Not what's the outcome going to be, because that's a combination of all of that moment-to-moment work. So it's really about really present mind and being mindful about where you're at right now and what you have to do without letting your mind wander. Because the minute it wanders, it may project. And if it projects and it's not positive, it's going to poison the present moment. And it's going to start leading to that self-fulfilling prophecy. So you have to disconnect it. I have to get them to disconnect to just focus on this. And then before they know it, they come off 18 and like they don't even know what they shot, which is my ultimate situation, is that they don't know what and then they look at their card and they're like, wow, bud. Yeah. But that's because you finally let go of an uncontrollable and the fear associated with that uncontrollable.
Howard, I love all that. And Dr. Eddie, that's a really great question. It's so deep because
awesome question.
Part of it is, the identity and going into ego, and in the spiritual world, which the podcast dives into and a lot of my research as well, a lot of it out there is like beating down the ego, like the ego's bad or the identity's bad. I feel like that's not true. It's a part of the preferences. Maybe I prefer to be an athlete because I enjoy expressing myself in this way. When ego goes too far and it's like, I'm a football player but then I've got like the ego part of like, now I've got to buy all these shiny things and do all this crazy stuff. I had an athlete I was coaching, and he's a professional football player, and I go, how accurate is ballers? And he's like, it's more accurate than you'd think. And I was like, whoa, man, that's crazy. And so that's where I think the ego can kind of go a little bit of awry. And for me, what I have an understanding of what I think the most ideal and pinnacle mindset would be to be can you do your sport? Can you do your profession? Can you be that entrepreneur? Can you have that outcome and goal and lose and still be whole, complete,
Wow,
joyous,
good.
and
Really
fulfilled
good.
as a human being?
That's
To miss the
powerful.
game-winning shot and be like, oh, shoot, you know, I really want to make that shot. But you know what? My family life is great. My contribution to community is great. My relationships are great. And one of the things that I've learned from interviewing so many amazing people is, you know, qualities of like a quote unquote enlightened person, which may be just a little bit more happy, a little bit more like directing their life on purpose, not on default. If you're a victim to your circumstance, you know, the enlightenment, I think, is just a few key principles. But one of them that I've noticed is not what can I get? You know, how do I get that championship? How do I get all of these different things? Is how can I give? Now, when we want to achieve a goal, maybe I have a podcast goal, maybe I have a goal with my book, maybe I have a future goal of something else. That's fine as an expression of me, but it doesn't define me completely. That's just one way that I want to express here. In the same way, Bruce Lee, a martial artist, obviously people know who Bruce Lee is. He's one of my, you know, greatest teachers and somebody I studied my whole life. He would just say like, it's an expression of you. And he also studied philosophy and was really great and put out a lot of perspectives that way. But he was really about this balance of like putting every ounce of your being into how you want to express. Like, you are here, express, right? But it is so much bigger than whatever that expression is. This life is so mysterious that if all you're trying to do is just focus on one acquisition of an outcome, you're going to be missing a lot more. And I think that when an athlete is relaxed, when they're whole, when they're complete, when their life is in order, they're going to express way better. And we know that when you go through and you're trying to perform and you have stress hormones, you perform worse. If you're super stressed out, if you're worried about making the shot, if everything is a muck over here, it's so hard for you to concentrate because everything's all frigged up. But when everything's peaceful and you're super zen, you know, you're good and you can go perform and you can choose that outcome. Go ahead, Howard.
No, it's so awesomely, beautifully said, Matt. And it's so ironic. It's the acceptance that you're going to be okay if you miss the shot that actually increases the probability of a really high make percentage. And that's the letting go piece. It's to let go to receive, right? You've got to give it up in order to not get it, but to be free and open to be your best. And I love how you said that. That was really well said.
Eddie, did you want to throw in a thought?
No, I could only dilute it. It's beautiful.
Well, I appreciate you asking the question. And, you know, I want to honor your guys' time. And this has been such a treat. I could talk to you guys about so many different things. But I wanted, if you guys could, just touch a little bit on flow state, because I feel like that's one of those pieces out there that's, again, trying to get biohacked. You know, I even show, you know, in my Zen Athlete program, and I can increase the probability of you getting into a more powerful frame of mind. But those flow states, those experiences when I'm on my snowboard, or I've had these runs on my snowboard where I did so many hard tricks and landed them all perfectly. And at times it would take all of my concentration to land one of those things perfectly. And I'm like, what's going on today? What is so different? And my thing about flow state that I believe is so important, and we've touched on this, is its process. You know what I mean? It's these breakthroughs, especially in skateboarding. Skateboarding is so much failure, you know? But over time, over increments of time of so much practice and process, you have these experiences where you are just so good and you are actually in flow and it's coming naturally and you're experiencing unconscious competence. And so I'm just curious if you guys could weigh in on how you guys train your athletes or what you view flow state as.
Yeah. I mean, there's like, was it 8 or 9 qualities that officially define what a flow state is? And I think one of the most important ones is feedback without evaluation, which is my sort of twist on it. Like, you need to be able to get that moment-to-moment feedback so that you're in the moment of the performance, that all of your attention and energy is on what's happening right now, and to not get caught up in your head. The other aspect is that, you know, we can't just automatically have that, because we also need a challenge that's going to engage us enough. So we will escape the flow state if it's too easy or too difficult. So sometimes the flow state isn't always in our control either. So, and I guess maybe the last third quick point about it is that we can't be in it all the time. And I think the more that we strive to be in it, that disrupts it, because now we're striving for a flow state. We're not really invested in what we're actually doing. So when we talk about these peak performances, we call them a peak for a reason, because we don't do them all the time. So I think, Howard, you were saying it earlier, is that, we have to really kind of go into our competitions and expect that most of the time we're not going to be at our best, but we have to give 100% of whatever it is that we have. If we've only got 80% today, then we've got to give 100% of that 80%. And I think that brings us close to that flow state.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if that is what we have that day, then guess what? That is our best for that day. And
Right.
Not that you want to accept it for tomorrow, but that you can accept that it is for the moment, so that you can get into the flow state with it instead of having any resistance towards it. It's like if golfer's fighting the way that he's brought his swing to the golf course for the day, it's going to get worse. But if he accepts that that's what he has for the day, he can learn to play with it and manage the round that way, and stay in the competition and stay in the game, in the hunt, so to speak. And, which reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Jack Nicklaus, who said, I didn't win my 18 majors by playing my best. I won my 18 majors by managing my poor rounds better than anybody else could during the tournament, until I got to a good round. So it was about him accepting when he didn't have his best, to be able to manage that, to know how to be a champion. And that's part of it is, it's the pursuit of perfection, not whether or not you're achieving perfection at every moment, but pursuing it and being okay with where you're at each moment, with the will to get better in the next moment, I think is the perfect balance. And, for me, getting more specific about flow state, it's like when all the work and all the struggle and all the hard hours and blood, sweat, and tears comes down to the moment where you finally just know, before you even step onto the course or the court or the field, that you are right where you're supposed to be. And then there's no worry about outcome anymore. It's just about absorbing total awareness of where you're at and everything you know how to do, and trusting that and letting it go. And the more you can get prepared for that before that, the more you can let go when it begins, the more you'll be in flow state for longer periods of time during your competition. And it's amazing to watch great sporting events. That's why it's so fun to see athletes in that space where just like, we know the magic is there and it's coming. And sure enough, we can sense it. We can feel it. We've all watched it long enough to tell when somebody's not there and when they're there. And it's really, but it is fleeting. It's a fleeting place.
You realize that you're in it, you're out of it.
Yeah, exactly right.
Oh man,
exactly right.
I'm in it.
That's why in baseball, when someone's throwing a no-hitter, after the inning, when they come into the dugout, everybody scampers to the other end of the dugout. No one wants to go near them. They don't want to talk to them. They don't want to touch them. They don't want to don't even just let them be in that state. Don't ruffle where that guy is. It's pretty interesting. And it reminds me, I'll never forget. There was a World Series about 5 years ago. I forget who the pitcher was for the Mets. And he was just mowing people down. And the manager told him in the dugout that he wasn't going out for the next inning, and he lost his mind because he was in flow state. But the manager went to this whole new area that baseball is in of sabermetrics, where it's all about numbers and left brain, and said, no, you've got your pitch count. And he's like, look at him like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like in my peak state. I'm like the crowd, the energy, and sure enough, he put somebody else in, gave up a couple homers, and they lost and got knocked out. I forget who it was. It was about 5 years ago or 4 years ago. It was an incredible moment. But anyways, I digress. So that to me is what flow state, how to be most prepared to present the conditions for yourself to let it happen more easily.
Amazing, guys. And I think the one thing that you said there that I'd like to add on to is the environment, just like having that awareness and not taking that feedback. Because I think that when you start to analyze everything, sport is happening too fast for you to analyze it immediately anyways. You can't. It's all happening unconsciously. And in life too, I feel like the only difference is it happens a little bit slower. And to use the example of one of the athletes that I worked with, Brody Carmichael, and I reference him a lot because he fell on a front flip and he wanted to land a front flip on his motorcycle. And so I said, hey, you don't have to read my book. You don't have to go through my course. What you need to do is you need to visualize this trick until you know you can land it. Visualize it 1 hour a day until you know you can land it. And I could say this because his mental game was strong. He had ability. He was within his realm, and everything else was positive. So 3 weeks later, he landed the front flip. 3 weeks later, he landed the world's front flip heel clicker on a motorcycle.
Wow.
3 weeks after that, he landed the world's first front flip Superman on a friggin' motorcycle, and he wasn't even practicing it into foam pits at the time. He was just going, and then he was speaking at schools to kids. And so the reason why I shared this story is because he had a catalyst to really add the mental game. You know, he really had this necessity to say, you know what, this is an outcome that I want, and I'm going to add in this form of the mental game where I feel like it's really missing. Even now today, so few people are using visualization and the ability to quiet the mind. If your mind is always racing, you don't have the ability to stop that teleprompter in your mind. And when I'm teaching kids and try to distill like Zen athlete as small as I can, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Eddie, and I know we got to wrap up, but I know you do a lot of work for kids, and I appreciate you for that. You're such an awesome guy. We talked about your kids on our first podcast. So if you're teaching a kid how to do a basketball shot, teach them first thing, quiet your mind, take 3 deep breaths. An individual who has the ability to quiet their mind and somebody who can't is a fundamental shift in consciousness and how they navigate existence. Second thing is just visualize the shot going in. This will show you that you now influence your reality. There's an internal dialogue too, you know, say something positive. I can make this shot. I will make this shot. Also, you're directing your intent and your will. It will increase the probability. It's a fundamental difference in the quality of your life, and I think in the quality of consciousness, because you're doing something on purpose. And then the final thing is, if you miss the shot, what's the most empowering and positive perspective you can have? How can you be whole, complete, harmonious, even if you become, even if you fail, that this one thing, this one time, not every single time, it's just this one time, but that ability to quiet the mind and move through that is going to allow whatever's happening in the unconscious realm, whatever's happening in the environment, whatever's happening that you can't even see, like your unconscious mind is picking up so much information, but it requires you to be able to kind of quiet that mind and really center into that moment, like a Zen master or like a Zen monk, or what an old Shaolin master would have to do, or the samurais, because they're gonna die. How much more in the moment could you be if somebody's gonna stab you with a sword? And this was a part of their training. Mandatory, necessity, don't pass go. And we have all this other types of training that's mandatory, like fitness and cardio and things like that. And I feel like the simple aspects of the mental game should be in sport, they should be in school, and they should be taught and tested and understood and revised and communicated. And that's my rant. It's not really a question.
No, 100%. I mean, one of the missions of my life is to make sure that self-understanding, self-awareness, and mindfulness gets taught in schools. I think it's critical for our society to evolve to the next level. If we don't quiet our minds down and learn how to use that power that comes from that space. Right now the distractions and the amount of data in the left brain is really, it's causing a lot of anxiety and a lot of problems. So I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, and I'll cap it off and with maybe a different perspective, but wraps it up nicely, is that I think we should all recognize that we have more responsibility to own our ability to focus. I mean, to go on about, medications and self-medicating or prescription meds, for ADHD, or, that, well, there's this problem and there's this distraction. We have all this shit. It's real easy to point the fingers, but ultimately these are our brains. And are we doing the exercises like mindfulness or what have you? I'll do my plug for sleep here. I become fanatical about sleep and sleep hygiene and doing that with my athletes. If they're getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night, I won't even do mental training until I get them on a decent sleep schedule, because your brain just simply can't function that way. So there's that plug that I wanted to be sure to squeeze in. We have to be responsible. These are our bodies, these are our brains. And the idea of, I can't believe how many athletes I've worked with when we talk about focus, is actually something that can be trained. You can do that with mindfulness. And if you're not practicing it every day, you're not doing everything that you can to get better. It's more than just a skill. You guys know this. When you're doing mindfulness, you're getting physiological changes in your brain. When you're not getting enough sleep, your frontal lobe is cut off from your amygdala and your emotions run wild. And there's nothing you can do about that because they're disconnected. So you have to do these things, get your sleep, do your mindfulness in order to do all of the wonderful things that we've talked about today. Those skills won't work unless you've got the brain power to get them done.
Amazing. Very well said. I'm glad you came in it from that angle, and I could dive in on sleep. I could dive in on a lot of things, but I just wanted to honor you both. Thank you both for who you are, for what you're doing in the world, for everything you're up to, for coming on the show. This is awesome. It was an experiment. So it was such a joy to watch you guys talk and be a part of that. Is there anything that you guys want to add? You want to add some closing statements, maybe anything you want to share, and also where they can find more about you if people want to look deeper into your work?
First of all, Matt, same to you. Really appreciate who you are and what you do. Same to you, Dr. Eddie. Thank you for a really enlivening conversation with the three of us. This was awesome. So appreciate being able to be on and contribute. The last thing I'll say is when it comes to what you're trying to achieve or any dream or desire that you have, to always believe that anything is possible in any moment, and to always believe that you are worthy of achieving what you want. If you're willing to be open and honest with yourself, and you're aware of whatever the system is that you're going into and what it takes to get there, not that you can't push and stretch the system if you want, as long as you know what you're up against and you're not delusional about it, it's yours for the taking if you're willing to put the hard work in and really dive into self-awareness enough till you break through that and let that belief shine through. And then as far as resources on where anybody can find me, my two books are I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are, and Time in a Bottle, Mastering the Experience of Life, both deep dives into self-awareness. And then the website is howardfalco.com or totalmindsports.com, where I teach about mindfulness and mental strength.
Yeah, and concluding for me, this was so much fun, man. I could talk about this every day, all day. And so I really appreciated the newer perspectives, and I'm going to take the stuff that you guys have been talking about and bring it into my practice. So thank you very much. I guess my concluding comment goes back to where my passion and my heart is to the listeners, is to expect the adversity, to welcome it as part of that process. And the more that you can get comfortable knowing that you are going to sacrifice and bring that along for the ride, the better off you will be. As far as resources, dreddieoconnor.com. That course that I did is 12 hours, covers just about everything in the field of sports psychology through the great courses. I've been really pleased to hear that the feedback on that course, they've had people who are 70, 80 years old who said that they can apply it, people in business and coaches, sports psychology, young professionals. So it's a nice combination of taking the science, using sport as examples, but also applying it to life, that it's also for non-athletes. And then I've got free resources. I've got like about 160 mental toughness and 60-second videos. So if you follow me on YouTube or on my social media, I'm still putting those out. So real short attention spans, 1 minute at a time, helping you be better. And I speak. So if you like what I'm saying, you'd like to bring me in, I'd love to travel and bring this to you. So thank you to both of you.
Amazing, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Anybody listening to this, definitely check out their work. Dr. Eddie, I definitely want to go through the course. And Howard, you got to send me some books. But these guys are masters. They know what they're talking about. You can learn a lot. So I appreciate what you guys are doing and for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
See you guys. Peace.